Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will begin with chapter 9, verse 3. Chapter 9, verse 3. Noach has come off of the ark. Noach has brought offerings. And God now says to Noach, Koremes asher hu chai lochem yelochla. Anything that crawls on this earth, you can eat it. Kierek Asev Nasati Lochem Eskol. Like vegetables. In other words, creatures are the same as vegetables as far as I'm concerned for you, Noach. Obviously, Noach is not a Jew. We're not talking about kashrus right now. But before Noach, it was prohibited for a person to kill anything in this world. Not only, of course, prohibited to kill other people, but prohibited to kill other life forms. And now God tells Noach, if you want to kill in order to eat, no problem. So the question is obvious. If it wasn't good enough for Adam, why is it good enough for Noach? Why is that? So there's all kinds of things about this, but I just want to share with you this Orachayim. Orachayim on Pasuk Gimel, Ko Remes Asher Huchai, Yesh Lodas. One needs to understand, Lama Lo Hutar Abasul Adam El Noach. Why is meat permissible to Noach but not to Adam? Venira, it would appear, Ki Noach Mishalo Nasnu Lo L'Shalosh Sibos. It would appear that it would only made sense for Noach to be allowed to eat creatures and his descendants to be allowed to eat creatures for three reasons. Number one, Ha'echad, Sheba Emtsauso Matzah Hashem L'Kayim Amin. If Noach wasn't around, the whole world would have been destroyed. In other words, because Noach was the type of person that was worthy of being saved, all these creatures got saved. Noach saved all these creatures. So if not for Noach, these creatures wouldn't be around. So these life forms wouldn't be around. So to say to Noach, how dare you kill for your own pleasure? Gosh, if it wasn't for Noach, they wouldn't be around. Beis, Shutarach Bahem, V'yag Abateva. It's not only that his merit saved them, he worked very hard for them in the ark. He took care of them in all kinds of ways. Gimel, Shagarim Bemtsauso Korbano, Shinisratza Hashem, Vinishba, Shaloyi Kares Kol Basar. Lozahitalo Hashem Lecho Mipri Targo. One more thing, thanks to the Korban, as we discussed yesterday, thanks to the sacrifices that Noach brought, God says, I won't wipe out the life from this world anymore. So for all these three reasons, this is sort of coming to Noach, because if not for Noach, none of these creatures will be alive. Just interesting. Okay, let's go on now to verse 12. Verse 12. Vayomer Elokim.
What was this last time you said?
Vayomer Elokim. And Hashem said, Zos os habris asher anino saying, this is the sign which I place between me and you and all life with you, l'daros olam, for all generations. We should actually see verse 11 also. Just backtracking one verse. I will fulfill my covenant with you. And flesh will not be wiped out because of the waters of the flood. And there will not be a flood to destroy the land. And now God says, here's the sign. Here is the sign of our covenant. Verse 13, Es kashti nasati be'anan. I have placed my rainbow in the cloud. And the rainbow should be a sign between me and between the land. And it will be when I bring my cloud upon the land that you'll see the rainbow within the cloud. Okay, so there's just a very interesting thing to think about with all of this. Any kid who does a science experiment can make a rainbow. So what does this mean? Does this mean that God only created the science of the rainbow at this juncture? Does this mean that God made rainbows from the beginning with this in mind? Well, what exactly is going on here? What does it mean when God tells him, this is my sign with you? What exactly are we saying? So if you look at the Ramban on Pasuk Yud Beis, Zos os habris asher ani no saying, Hamash b'mina os hazeh, Shloya keshes be'onan b'masa bereshis. What it sounds like from this pasuk is up until this moment, there had never been such a thing as a rainbow. That when God created the world, there was no possibility of rainbows when God created the world. The ata bara Hashem chadasha lasos keshes bashamayim b'yomanan. And now God makes this creation anew for this moment. There'd be this idea of a rainbow. The Amru Batamos is that, first of all, what is it about a rainbow that tells you, that God makes peace with you? So they explained the reason is keshes lo aso she raglov lamala. The feet of the rainbow are pointed downwards, right? Sheyare kilu min hashamayim morimbo. Imagine, think about the rainbow for a second as like a bow and arrow. So if the rainbow was like this, it would be like God was aiming his bow to fire down at us. But the fact that the rainbow is like this, it's like God, like turns up his bow that he's not going to attack us. God makes the rainbow in the other direction. It's to show I'm not shooting. I'm not firing on you from the heavens. So that's what it is. It's not the colors of the rainbow per se. It's the shape of the rainbow implies a bowman with his bow pointing upwards as opposed to pointing at himself, as opposed to being pointed at his adversary. Evidently, it was normal for people who were in a military context when they were going to show that they're coming in peace, they would turn their bow towards themselves. Okay. Vanachnu al korchenu namin l'divrei hayavonim shemilat hashemesh ba'avir alach ya'kashes b'solada. So now we understand what the sign is of the rainbow. But now the Ramban says, we're really compelled to accept the scientific statement that if the sun shines down on air that has moisture in it, the result of that will be a rainbow. The Ramban says, do the experiment at home, right? Take a cup of water, stick it out by the sun, and you'll see a rainbow. So obviously it's difficult to understand. And so what does this mean? That God tells them, okay, I made a rainbow. Ramban says, truth be told, even though we originally said the pasuk sounds like God created rainbows for the first time now, if we think more about the language of the pasuk, we'll understand this. Ki Amar es kashti nosati ve'anan. A really interesting point from the Ramban in verse 13. The language in verse 13 is, I have placed my rainbow in the cloud, past tense. V'lo amar ani nosein be'anan. God doesn't say in verse 13, I'm placing my rainbow in the cloud. God says, I placed my rainbow in the cloud. Kasher amar zoso sabris asher ani nosein. In verse 12, God speaks in the present tense. God says, this is the sign that I'm giving you. And then in the very next verse, he says, I put in the past tense, I did put my rainbow in the cloud. It would be grammatically consistent to say, I'm placing my rainbow in the cloud. Why? Why, when he talks about the rainbow, is it in the past tense? Umilas kashti morash lo akeshes tchila. And he also says, by the way, my rainbow. What does he mean, my rainbow? The rainbow of mine that I already put in this world before all of this. So the Ramban says, when you think about it, the science experiments seem to agree with the pasuk, that the science experiments imply that this is part of nature, that a rainbow can exist. And the pasuk implies that the rainbow existed before this event. So then what's God saying to him? God's saying to him, yeah, there's this thingamajiggy that existed in nature before all of this anyway, and you should see this as a sign of my peace. What's the sign then? The Ramban says, now the way we should understand the pasuk is as follows: the rainbow that I put in the cloud from the beginning of creation. Let the rainbow which is part of nature, has always been part of nature, serve as a sign between me and you from this day onwards. Shekolzman she'erena askir ki bris shalom b'nei v'nech. God says, whenever I see the rainbow, I will remember that we have a covenant of peace. If you ask the question, Matam Bakeshes Lios Os, so then what does it mean that the rainbow is a sign? It was already around anyway. Hinehu Katam, Eid Hagalazeh, Veida Metzeva, V'chein Keshev Kvasos Tikach B'yodi, Bavur Tiali Le'ida. Ramban says we see in Chumash that there are times where people will point to something that they certainly didn't create. There's just a rock or something, and they say to each other, this rock acts as a sign of our agreement. Okay, so in other words, the Ramban says the meaning is that God says, look, this rainbow already exists, but I'm telling you that it now takes on a deeper meaning. And when I look at the rainbow, when you look at the rainbow, we'll remember this covenant between us. But it's not that he's creating the rainbow now. He's just saying the fact that the rainbow is this upside down bow acts as a reminder that we've got an agreement between us. That's how the Ramban explains it. Okay, now let's go on to, okay. Let's see the Ramban on Pasuk Yud Daled. Let's see verse 14 first. Verse 14. Vaya ba'anani anan al aretz, and it will be when I bring my cloud upon the land. V'nirasah keshas be'anan, and the rainbow will be seen within the cloud. Verse 15. Zachartias b'risia shebeni v'nechem uvein kol nefesh chaya b'chol basar. And I will remember my covenant between me and you and all life. And I won't bring the waters of the flood anymore. The Ramban has just an interesting perspective on this pasuk. If you look at the Ramban on pasuk Yudalad, Vayab ani anan al haaretz, and it will be when I bring my cloud upon the land. Shul yair Hashem panav elav mechatos yoshveha. That God will not shine his face upon the land because of the sins of the residents. V'nirasa midas hadin shali ve'anan. And the cloud represents that God is not bringing the sun upon us. So God is not smiling upon us. Why is God not smiling upon us? Because we haven't done something so good. We, being mankind, haven't done something so good. And there's a moment of justice, of judgment within my cloud. At that moment, then at that moment, when I'm not so happy with what's going on in this world, and I'm inclined to possibly bring punishment, I'll remember the covenant. And I'll have compassion on the life in this world. So we might go a little bit further with this tomorrow. I'll have to see. But just an interesting thing to think about. So we discussed this morning the Orach Chaim regarding why Noach would be allowed to eat animals and Adam wasn't. We discussed the Ramban regarding how to view this rainbow. Is it new? Is it old? And then we also discussed the Ramban regarding the significance of what does it mean when I bring a cloud? So Ramban says, when I bring a cloud, it means I'm not shining my sun upon you. I'm not happy with you. But even then, I'll remember the rainbow.